Hello, everyone who's popping in and joining. I'm going to wait just a few minutes to give everyone some time to funnel in here.
Awesome. Already see some familiar names popping in. It's great.
Exciting. It's great to see. As you pop in, if you want to throw a little comment on where you're joining from in the chat, it'd be great to see where everyone's dialing in from today. I know on our side, we've got some folks across the country here. Bino's in Vancouver. Chase is in Detroit. I'm in Denver. So we are spread across today.
Technically two countries, Mara. Sounds
that is true.
Yeah.
Got international today.
So summer arrived yesterday here in Vancouver. So we're happy for the month of heat that we get.
I'd be happy to pass over any of my Denver heat. It's been too hot to function the last month and a half. All right, we'll give everyone just a couple minutes more. We've got a jam-packed webinar today, so we'll dive right in just a minute or two. Thanks everyone who's popping in, joining us live.
Mara, while we're waiting for folks, I guess we can clarify for anyone who sees this, these are not real. I get asked this all the time. So I think, Bino, the first time we talked, you asked me this too. These are cardboard.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a big space fan. And
I was going to ask if you could get in the astronaut suit to do your talk, and I'll have a costume as well, and we can do it in costume.
So I do. This maybe is embarrassing. I do own a suit. Not that complicated, but yeah, we did it for my son's birthday party. We dressed up as astronauts. So
how cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Careful, Chase, on your next webinar, we're going to request specifically that you are in an astronaut suit. So
yeah, I don't think so. I don't know about that one.
All right, everyone. I think we're still going to have some faces trickling in, but we've got a lot to cover today. So let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome to our webinar, everyone, and thanks again for joining. Today, we are talking about shift left, turning security into revenue. This is a long-awaited conversation for both revenue and security leaders alike who are looking for how to improve the way we talk about trust in the customer journey and how to build your buyer confidence really early and often. This is a topic of conversation that spreads across the organization from front to back of house, and we're so excited to have you here with us as we are unpacking what shifting left in security really means for companies and ultimately their customers. To kick things off, I'm Mara Williman. I'm the Director of Product-Led Sales here at Trustpage. I'll be your host today and representing the go-to-market and revenue side of the conversation. And I am joined by two incredibly brilliant and wildly passionate technical minds. So let me introduce those folks real quick. First and foremost, we have Sabino Marquez, the Value Assurance CISO at Cognota, with over 25 years of experience in the risk and cybersecurity communities. He is a speaker and author of the Value Assurance practice and joins us as a passionate advocate and thought leader in the role of InfoSec within SaaS teams. Admittedly, when I first met Sabino, I was not only taken by his enthusiasm for this topic, which you will definitely hear, but his incredible knowledge of how security impacts the entirety of the organization. He has some really powerful thoughts on how security teams can be leveraged as true sales enablement. So I'm really excited he's a part of this conversation today. Thanks so much for joining us, Sabino.
Thank you.
We are also joined by Chase Lee, founder and CEO of Trustpage. With over 20 years of experience in security, Chase first learned how to code in the white hat hacker security communities, where he really built his passion for this space. And in the last decade, Chase has founded and successfully exited 3 startups where he has played the role of CTO, owned and built security programs, and even managed innovation and GRC teams at large enterprise organizations. After seeing and experiencing the pain point in the security in the sales cycles and buyer journey at every company, Chase founded Trustpage to help companies turn their security postures from a hurdle into a competitive advantage. So thanks so much for joining us, Chase.
Yeah, absolutely, Mara.
All right, we have a very full webinar today, so let's dive right in. We're going to first be talking about the subject of shifting left, which traditionally and most commonly comes from the development engineering communities. This might have where you have heard this. And as a former engineer and CTO, Chase, I'm going to turn it over to you. Can you give us a little bit of context into where shift left comes from, what it really means in the development process, and maybe moreover, as the theme of this webinar, how shift left is being reimagined to apply to security in the customer journey?
Yeah.
Loaded question, but I'll turn things over to you.
No, absolutely. Thank you. So I think shift left is something that you're actually seeing a lot of people talk about in really every aspect of their business. It started out because in the development or engineering world, we typically develop products using like a waterfall model, right? So we're going to go through a long design process, we'll build it, then we'll ship it to people, we'll get some feedback. Then you saw more methodologies like Agile coming around where we started to take on a more iterative process. And what we saw, particularly with how we tested software, was that we started to shift left. And I just want to clarify, that doesn't just mean that we took all of our tests and we shifted them all the way left, right? That's not really what shift left means. A lot of people have this perception that you're going to take something and you're just going to move it over here. Shift left is really about distributing something that you typically wait to the end of a process, distributing it throughout your process. And overall, that shifts that process further left. So what we found with testing our code was if we did it earlier and more often, we got more easily maintainable, more reliable code as a result. Then we started doing this to how we designed our products. And now we even see it in the security world, particularly with DevSecOps, right? So security is getting involved at the beginning of when we're actually building products, rather than waiting until something's built, shipped to customers, and then saying, wait a second, is that secure? That's not ideal for many reasons. And so we've seen this shift left in security on the technical side. But again, what we're really seeing is a shift left across all sorts of business processes, which I think is what we're going to talk about today.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Chase. And can you talk a little bit more about in the buyer journey specifically? You know, this is something as the revenue side of the house I see happen all the time. Traditionally, we've seen deals where they get stuck at the end of those late stage sales processes. So what does it really mean to shift security left in the buyer journey? How are companies thinking about this and what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of ways this applies. To give sort of a simple example, oftentimes, someone comes, they're interested in your product, they're talking to a salesperson, they realize, hey, this is something I might be interested in buying. They go through that process, they get all the way to the end and they say, wait a second, I need you to fill out the security questionnaire. And then sometimes, that actually might kill the deal. You realize, hey, I can't actually buy you. You're not secure enough, right? Or my team didn't like the way you answered these questions. At the very least, it's going to slow that process down. And so what you're starting to see is, buyers educating themselves and looking to remove roadblocks earlier in their buying journey, because they don't want to waste time, months evaluating a product if ultimately they're going to get to the end and it's going to fail, right? So again, shifting left is all about distributing more of that process, typically reserved for the end, and moving it earlier. And that way you actually find out really early where things are going to break, right? Or oftentimes you might actually give a team enough time where they can improve their security posture by the time you would get to the end of that process, right? You find out early on what the roadblocks are going to be. And as you're evaluating the rest of the product, you actually have time to solve those things. We do this all the time where, hey, we're missing a feature, but you're going to come on board in 3 months, so it'll be ready by the time you're here. We're starting to see that now in security as well, right? Hey, there's a couple gaps we found because we started our security review on day 1 versus day 100.
That makes perfect sense. And actually, as we frame out the next question and move into the larger security story, we're actually going to do a very quick poll here. So I'm curious to see, out of the folks that are here, you'll see a poll pop up. At what point in the sales cycle, or really even buyer journey, are you currently introducing your security policies? So I'll give you a little bit of time to answer this question, see a couple different options here that align to the buyer journey. This is something Sabino and I have talked about at great detail, actually, especially being a revenue leader myself. Traditionally, we're really used to waiting until the very end, as Chase is mentioning. That can be really challenging, obviously, for delaying deals, closing sales cycles, but even having predictable pipeline. Often when I was working specifically with the Fortune 100, we would see examples where I'd get to the end of a sales cycle, we'd have all the checkboxes we need from the business teams. And then it could take another, what we thought would be a couple weeks, maybe, that would turn into 4 to 6 month long processes. So I'm definitely curious to see where teams are currently introducing this. So I'll give you just a few seconds in the poll to see where we're at. What I have found too is some of the most, what I will call, progressive revenue and sales leaders really are introducing this early and making it an enablement conversation, which is really awesome to see. Great. Okay. So as we move into the next piece of the puzzle here, Bino, I'm going to turn things over to you. I know this is something you're super passionate about, and ultimately it's the story of security at large. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about why it's valuable for companies to see the story of security as an overall part of their organization, and why it makes sense to communicate that story to prospects and customers.
Well, there's a few reasons why you would want to. They seem independent of each other, but they're all the same reason. The first is that an outsourced data processing relationship is based on trust. They're outsourcing a significant IT process to you. You have to be as good at or better than their internal IT and security processes. So number one there. Number two, there are personas behind the software champion who get paid to stop the deal because that's their job. They can't let unsafe software enter the organization. So you have, IT reviewer guy, privacy reviewer guy, procurement guy, legal guy, security guy, all these different actors whose job is to vet vendors and not allow risk in, or manage that risk if you do allow it in. And you can't buy without them. They're on your buying team. So let's treat them like they're on the buying team. They're not the enemy. They're part of the buyer's journey, right? Which is why you want to bring this topic up as early as possible and position trust and safety as the foundation of the conversation. No matter what blinking lights we're going to sell you, we're trustworthy. And if you go and buy other blinking lights, maybe those blinking lights will solve your problem, but let's really think about whether or not you can trust them in the long term. We're going to be an extension of, and maybe better than, your internal program. And that's a very attractive proposition for organizations that have diligence built into their software acquisition process. Like we just said, the deal isn't over till the check cashes. So you can't bring the champion to their diligence teams and then throw them at to the wolves. They may not know what to do. If we tell good security stories and we have the right documents and the right evidence and the right artifacts for all these different audiences that we just talked about, we can help our champions diffuse those conversations by making trust the first thing we talk about, and not necessarily the business benefit that you get out of the blinking lights that you're buying. So whatever your blinking lights are, trust always enhances that conversation and shrinks the amount of time it takes to get value from the tool that you're looking at.
I love your take on that. I really love the way that you're talking about these risk and assurance teams whose job are to evaluate the security of the vendors that you're bringing on as part of your buying team. I think sometimes we've traditionally on the revenue side of the house thought of or seen that team as maybe roadblocks to getting in the way of a deal. But I think the revenue leaders that can really think about the goal of these teams in many cases is to think about, keeping this zero trust perimeter around their company and then extending that perimeter to all the vendors they work with. It's their job to keep the boundary of the organization safe. And so when you can think about as a salesperson or as a revenue leader, my job also includes teaching my sales team how to educate my buyer to work with their own security team internally. Oftentimes, I don't know if either of you run into this, but I know I've run into scenarios where buyers don't even necessarily know how to go through their own internal security processes. So oftentimes having that conversation early can really matter. And Chase, I know this is something you and I talk a lot about often, which is how to frame that security story and when should a company start talking about this. So can you speak a little bit to maybe size and stage of company? Is it ever too early to start talking about it? What are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I don't actually ever think it's too early. I think there's, if you wait, you actually don't understand fully what opportunities you might be missing, right? If you're not telling a story, you can't get feedback on that story. And I think the strongest security stories are going to include the fact that trust, security, those are foundational, right, to what you're doing. And so they can't be things that necessarily are bolted on later. Now, if someone finds themselves in that position, which happens a lot, right? You can get pretty far. You can make some progress as a company, as a product, and you might say, oh, we need to improve our security, and you're going to put that in place later. Like that happens all the time, and that's okay, right? Everyone has their own journey with security. But this comes up a lot for me because I talk to a lot of early stage founders, and they're always asking themselves or saying it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And I always encourage them to start now. It's much easier from experience too, rather than trying to put something in place later. And I think ultimately your story is going to be strongest when you start on day one, when your team around you starts thinking about those things from day one. You're never going to get a stronger story than if you do that.
Yeah. So, like there's also another mental shift, and this one is difficult to make because it's counterintuitive. The revenue team's ability to tell security stories is limited by the business's investments in security, because business people are taught in business schools and everywhere they look, from investors to the textbooks in schools, you're taught that people like me are cost centers to be minimized. And then when you don't invest in security, then you're surprised when you have no security story to tell. I like to position security investments as revenue and value investments, not ops investments. I mean, they are ops investments, don't get me wrong, but when you don't invest here, you're cutting the legs out from under your revenue teams, because we want to shift left all the way to marketing to have a story, right? Shifting left where you forward deploy security stories in front of the reps, so the champion can catch that story, run it up their flagpole, show that flag to the personas behind them. Hey, IT guy, hey, security guy, hey, due diligence, compliance, procurement guy, check out this flag that I'm flying. And there's everything they'd ever want to know. Every policy, every audit, every config, everything. Look, when you think about how software is sold, you go to a product, feature page. Every single feature is listed on that product. You go to the help section, you go to the support pages, everything about the product is there, but I don't ever see everything about security there. And I evaluate everything about security in the buyer's journey when I'm being sold software. So if you're not disclosing to me, what are you doing internally? I hate it when companies say, oh, you're in the wrong license tier to get the SOC 2. No, if you have a single piece of data, you owe me a full open door to that closet of yours. Because if you're not showing everything in that closet, I cannot trust you. So we're shifting away from pushing security into the end of the conversation, hiding it, checking boxes, being minimal about it, and moving towards, hey guys, we have an amazing reason for you to trust us. Open the door. Look at all these reasons to trust us, and then give it away up front, such that the buyer can feel excited that they're gonna get this tool, because the people who always say no are gonna desperately say yes, because we're the type of vendor that you want to buy, right? There's not gonna be that renewal audit every time you want to go back to sell to them. There's not gonna be that annual, like if you sell multi-year deals or you want to sell multi-year deals, audits, each deal represents up to 3 annual audits, right? The onboard audit, the expand audit, and the renewal audit. But if you have a strong security story, you're not going to get those audits, and that's time that you give back to the reps to go and deliver more. So why aren't we doing that?
Yeah,
There's so much. Oh, sorry, Chase, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sabino, it's time back to your reps. It's also time back to your security team, right? And I think most of us in the industry probably feel the talent crunch around us, right? We're always being asked to do more with less. And for me personally, when I was looking at after I sold my last company, was looking at what to do next. That was one of the biggest problems I saw when it came to fighting cybercrime. How do we protect data, right? I just said, look, we don't have enough people in our coalition, right? I'm not going to go out and be able to train and create all of these people. So how do we make ourselves more efficient? And when you shift left, you get all that time back for your reps, but you get so much time back for your security team, so you can actually focus on building security, right? I shouldn't necessarily have to talk about security more than I actually get to work on. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, shifting left is also a compressing action, because when you shift left, instead of having this hard silo called the security team, security becomes a job description bullet point in everybody's job description, because everybody's responsible for defending our value, because everybody's responsible for creating our value. So you can't have one without the other. It's the same investment.
There's so much gold in what you all are saying. And between the thread of both of those comments, it makes me think about the concept of security being a team sport. And we've talked about this often, how security, sometimes people think about it as something you just have to prove throughout the initial sales cycle. But I really love, Sabino, you bringing this all the way left to marketing, and even as far right as the expansion and the retention, because it really does go across the entirety of your customer journey. So when we think about that, Chase, I actually was going to ask you this question regardless, but it was a really nice time for it, which is for the folks like all the way left on the go-to-market side of the house, right? Like, of course, there's revenue. The story is different in each team. Revenue leaders are working really consistently with their sales folks to train them about how to talk about it, to do so accurately and reliably, and of course build confidence in that process too, to make sure that when the salesperson is communicating that, there's real evidence and artifacts, and there's something they can point to that shows what the reps are really talking about. But I think we don't often hear it go all the way to marketing. So sometimes I hear folks who question, oh, do I really need to make security a part of my website? Do I need to include this public facing information? And it's funny for both of you, because I definitely know and hear your take on it, but I'd love for you to, Chase, and maybe Sabino too, to talk about why is a technical person, somebody who both of you have played the role of evaluating companies for the team, for the businesses that their companies want to bring on board as net new vendors. What's the first thing you do when you go to your website, and what happens if they don't have that security information for you? So Chase, I'll let you open the door on that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I do, and I would say a number of the folks on our team do as well. We usually bounce when we start looking for other options, right? If you're not going to tell your story, someone else will tell that story. And Mara, you know this well. You and I did this. We worked together at our last company, and we told our story very well. And it allowed us to push competitors off from around the table, right? We could charge more for our products. We invested more, and no one wanted to work with anyone else in the space because the story we told was so strong. And everyone else that, we talked to, they said, hey, why is everyone else, afraid to talk about this, right? They're shying away from it. So when you shy away from talking about it, it inherently instills a lack of confidence in your buyer. Well, why don't you want to talk about it, right? So I think for some folks, transparency traditionally has been a bit scary to adopt. But the reality is, if you don't tell a story, someone else will. And that will be their competitive advantage, not yours. Bino, I'm curious to see what your take is here.
I go, whenever my business brings me a vendor to review, I'll go to that vendor's website and look immediately for a top level page called security. And if that's not there, then I know they're not serious about being real data processors. Because being a data processor isn't just, let's start a software company, Chase. Let's go start a software company and we'll get people to give us, no. You're purporting to replace an internal function. That's what we're really saying. So how about we act that way and build that, as opposed to, build the minimum we need to sell and then pray to God that they renew. That's no way to run a business. I would not want to go to board meetings like that. You can't have confidence in that revenue projection when you're not investing, and it really is an investment decision at the top, because if you don't believe, as 3 out of 5 leaders I've spoken to don't believe, that assurance is part of the revenue journey, then you won't get it. You'll think the problem is, I don't have enough reps. Let me go hire more reps. Let me go hire more. It's a funnel problem, Sabino. No, it's not. Because no matter how much you fill that funnel, you're going to get to the same choke point, which is you're not trustworthy. Can't prove it, right? So I think about that a lot, because you have conversations with otherwise brilliant leaders, but they don't seem to be empathetic to the buyer's trust journey, because we're part of their value journey as data processors. Like, for example, the company that I work for is not regulated. There's no law in the world that says that learning operations data has to be anything. But if I build a bank inside of a learning operations company, then everybody who comes to get learning operations software is going to get bank level security. And why wouldn't you want that anyway? Wouldn't you expect that from every other vendor that you go with? So we don't want to say, oh, we're not impacted by compliance, Chase. We sell hot dogs, so there's no compliance, around us. Therefore, because the law doesn't make us do it, we're not going to invest. But you know what's the best thing about this is that I have a secret theory that the world is actually run by actuaries. You know, those reinsurers that create the insurance models. And back in 2016, back when the first wave of corporate ransomware attacks started happening, business leaders had a choice to make. I can invest $50,000 in a cyber insurance policy, which will pay me when I, get hacked, because I'm going to get hacked, because I'm not going to spend the money over here to actually defend myself. So actuarial models are updated every 5 years. So in 2022, the new models came out. And now software companies that I've worked with in the past cannot get insurance unless you are this tall to ride the ride. So it's no longer the customer asking you, please secure my data. Now it's the insurer telling you, we're not going to write a policy on you because we're not going to pay you a damn cent if you're not proving to us that you're defending yourself. So you're getting a lot of pressure, not just from the customer, not just from the market, but from the insurers and sometimes investors as well, who need that assurance that their mid to long-term investment will be there and you're not going to lose it to some incorrect decision to not defend yourself. Because I strongly believe that it's more profitable to defend yourself than not defend yourself. But we keep framing these defense discussions as cost minimization. What's the least I can spend to be safe is what I've heard. And that's the wrong answer, because that doesn't help Maricel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's the shift from sort of how do we just mitigate risk to actually how do we drive value for the business?
How do we drive value? You nailed it.
Yeah, Chase, I've heard you really talk about that a lot as well too. And I think even I've seen this in the progression of being in sales for close to 10 years now, right? It used to be that only the large enterprise companies would request these security reviews or the common familiar questionnaires that we've gone through over and over again. But now we see that trickling down into SMB companies who do want just as much assurance into the way that you're protecting their data, what data you have, how that you store it. And especially as some of the product-led growth models are starting to really take the market by storm, we see those companies who struggle with adoption. And really, I always question, say, is it an adoption problem, or really is it because companies don't want to give you their data and integrate your tools until they know that they can actually trust you, right? And so I think, when you look at the buyer journey, regardless of your go-to-market strategy, this concept of shifting left, I think really has larger implications for even your adoption usage across the board too. So just, I'm actually going to turn things over to you on that. What are some of the larger impacts on organizations across multiple teams? It's kind of a large question that you see for companies that are really enacting this shift left in security.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at something like security awareness training, right? We expect everyone in my organization to receive some level of security awareness. And that's kind of a base level of knowledge and understanding and learning that happens around, how do I make sure I keep my account safe? How do I recognize when someone's sending me an email that might be a phishing attempt? And obviously that's really healthy for the organization. What we often forget and what Shift Left really does is now everyone in your organization starts to also learn and understand your specific unique story around security, right? Why does this matter in your space? Why does this matter to your customers? Why does it matter to the other teams that you work with? And what that does is it injects security throughout every piece of your business. So when you're thinking about how do we onboard customers, right? How do we, shift data between teams? Everyone starts to think a little bit more carefully than I think you would with a base level of security awareness training, because suddenly they realize this isn't just the same security that company ABC has. This is our own specific story. This matters to our customers, to our bottom line. It matters to our growth, right? And I think that's something that everyone can get behind. And I think for me, the shift from viewing security as just mitigating risk or that's a cost center to, hey, this is actually how we create value for customers. This is how we create a better customer journey, a better buying experience. This is how we retain our customers. This is how we expand our customers faster. When you start to shift that, at the end of the day, there's no one in business who isn't going to say, yeah, I care about growth. They're all going to say that, right? And so it's a lot more exciting for everybody than just saying, oh, well, let's do these things and hope that, we don't get hacked, right? This becomes a much more exciting story. This is our identity. This is why we're different. This is why we're better, right? And so everyone becomes an evangelist of that story. And going back to my thoughts on our talent gap earlier, we enroll more of the organization in our security coalition by doing this than we do from a standard level of security awareness, which you need. That's the foundation, right? But when you layer this on top, you get that extra level of excitement, because this is why we can be excited about us.
Yeah. I like to say that security awareness will check your box, but creating a self-defending corporate mind you can sell. When our customers, the world's biggest companies, look over the ledge at their downstream supply chain and look at all their suppliers, they're expecting to see a mirror, a reflection of themselves, a reflection of their rigor, a reflection of their standards, not a distortion. It's a mirror conspiracy, right? They want to see a mirror. They don't want to see a funhouse mirror. So if you want to not get your, not be the little whack-a-mole that sticks its head up and not being secure, if you want to be invisible to the customer, look like them. But Sabino, we're a small company. Our company has as many people as one of our customers has in their whole security department. How can we possibly? And the answer is, you don't need to do everything. You don't need to do everything. You need to just figure out what it is that the customer needs. Okay, here's a great one. I like to say that nobody cares about security, because nobody actually cares about security itself. They care about the outcomes of security. They care about deals, customers, value, enablement, those kind of things. And when you pull it further, even backwards a bit more, security itself isn't even real. I teach this. Security is an emotion that you feel based off the evidence that you're presented. And when you're making security-oriented decisions, the way that buyers make security-oriented decisions, what you're trying to do is inspire in them sufficient security and trust emotion, because people don't buy goods and services. People buy relationships, stories, and magic. So when you're selling something and you're selling the story of security, think about what it would take to convince these very serious gray suit wearing diligence people in the background what kind of story, what kind of evidence they need, and then give them that evidence to satisfy them, because they're buying you as well. You see, going back to the scope of the rep's accountability, the rep is accountable for shepherding the champion, but also for shepherding everybody behind them who has to be sold just as much, right? So if you're considering security as part of, not security, trust and safety as part of your value journey, which is what we do here, then it's easy to tell value stories with trust and safety, because you can show how value is created or defended with trust and safety. I mean, the story tells itself once you start to tell it. It's just a matter of again, believing that this is the way. And those that don't believe this will be left behind. They'll wonder why their time to close is so long. They'll wonder why their rep productivity is dropping. They'll wonder where their sales velocity is going. They'll wonder why they're taking a whole quarter to finish a security review. All these questions have easy answers. It's called invest. And treat assurance as part of the revenue and product journey. Security is a ops practice. We can all agree on that. But it's also a communications practice. It's a legal practice. It's a RevOps practice. We report our outcomes in terms of revenue outcomes, not in terms of viruses stopped or firewall events analyzed, because no one cares about that. We only care about the outcome of that. So why don't we focus on outcomes? And when you focus on outcomes, you'll ask yourself, well, if this is the outcome, why haven't we been investing in this all along? And the answer is, it's never been framed that way for you. It's always been framed as this operational cost to be minimized. What's the least I can spend to check boxes? Not how can I build an investable part of the business that will bring multiples of value back? Because we're selling trust alongside our blinking lights, which solve business problems. It's the same journey, right?
Jason and I have talked about this for so many years. JC mentioned on the call earlier that, we've been doing this for, 8 years together. And I love your analogy of a mirror, and companies want to see that mirror back to them. And when you really train and enable your reps to talk about security really strong, I think the benefit of that is that you also don't have, as a security person, you don't have to get on as many calls to defend the security policy and posture, which not many security people love to do. But two, if you do still have to go through these reviews, or you have to get on the conversation, So level of trust that you have already established with that buyer, you're really on the offensive at that point, instead of having to course correct or maybe recorrect the way maybe people might have spoken to things or not spoken to things. And so I think that's the secret to a lot of even smaller companies who are selling to these massive enterprise organizations. It's about, can you tell the story of that mirror in a really trustworthy way? Can they look and say, wow, this company is really small, or they're maybe only a quarter of our size, but the way that they are securely protecting their data is so robust that we have no concerns at all. In fact, we're so trusted in working with this company and organization. So Chase, this might be a specific question for you, because admittedly, I've been very spoiled in that you've built wildly robust security programs, which have made it really easy for me in sales. And so what I've gotten to do is, because of that, educate our buyers and say, okay,
Yes.
let me tell you, these are the 5 questions your internal security team is going to ask. And oh, by the way, I lean into that as a competitive differentiator and say, when you go talk to competitors in the space, because I know you're going to, here are the things that I also want you to ask them, right? Because I know the way ours is going to stand up, it builds buyer confidence that I'm telling you who to go talk to and what to look for. And oh, by the way, you do, and they're answering things in a way that is only building more trust with us. So Chase, the key question for a lot of sales and revenue leaders is always, okay, all this is fine and dandy, but how does this actually help me reduce the amount of reviews I have to go through? How does this make them faster? Because I just want to get to revenue as quickly as possible. Buyer confidence is great. Trust is an amazing feeling. I know that plays a role, but how does this actually help me get through that faster? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the less you lean in, the more your buyer is going to have to lean in and meet you the other way, right? I think that's the easiest way to think about it. So the less you lean in, the bigger the questionnaire that's coming your way, right? You lean in more, you may not even get one, right? You may have already satisfied all their questions. You see this a lot at the SMB and mid-market level. You mentioned earlier that enterprise has, it's an ecosystem, right? We're all interconnected. So all of our requirements get passed along to our data processors and so on and so forth. I mean, that's codified, that's written into the law, at least in the EU and other places, hopefully more soon. But, you ultimately, you miss out on the opportunity to tell your story. And as a result, like, you lose deals, you lose leads. And what happens on the back end of that is you're going to get more diligence, right? So I think for revenue leaders, oftentimes you don't even know what you're missing out on up front, right? Like we said, if we don't see a security link on your site, like, we might just bounce. And on the back end of that, the less that you tell me, the more I'm going to have to ask you. And it really is just as simple as that, right? And it's also this notion of telling a consistent and an accurate story. When you do get into the level of a security questionnaire, it's much more scary than what you put on your site. What you put on your site has the opportunity to be reviewed, approved. We know we're saying the right things. When you put something in a security questionnaire, I saw something this morning, someone was being encouraged to lie in their security questionnaire. If you're a security professional, you should never do that, right? Anything that goes into a questionnaire, I mean, that should be obvious, but just as a reminder, anything that goes into a questionnaire, you could be legally liable for. In almost all cases, you are, right?
Yeah, questionnaires are legal representations. You have to be honest. You cannot be, because not only will the deal fall apart when the misrepresentation is uncovered, but also the lawyers will have a field day because you entered into a contract under misrepresentation. It's a disaster. So I've seen that pressure. Hey, security guy, just answer yes. Just click yes there. No one will know. Between you and like, no, are you out of your mind? You can't do that. So you have to be honest, and that's something that takes, in some organizations, a concerted, disciplined effort, because many times receiving, and this is a dirty secret, don't tell anybody. The dirty secret is that a lot of times buyer due diligence people will weigh security by the pound like it's a deli meat. And they'll say, these guys only sent us 3 documents. It doesn't weigh enough. They're not secure. But if I send them 3 completed questionnaires, plus all of my policies, plus all of these test memos, plus all these audit reports, then I have 6 pounds of deli meat. They're like, whoa, this is a lot of meat. There's something here. I'm not even going to look at every page in this 6 pounds of document. And what I found is a lot of times customers don't even look at the details when you present the whole picture at once. The less you present, the more they're going to scrutinize. And the more you present, the less it's because it's part of a larger frame story. Now, that doesn't mean that you just start to fill documents with lorem ipsum, right? But at the same time, every single thing that I create for a living inside my company is a public document for a customer. Every email I write, every audit I run, every internal review, everything that I do is the customer's property. Why? Because they need to know that they're safe. How do you answer the question, Chase? Am I safe? How do you answer that? Am I safe? Am I truly and really safe?
Well,
What does that mean? Safe how? Right?
Yeah.
How do you even prove that? So you have to have this overwhelming holistic safety story that triggers the lizard brain and inspires that feeling of I can trust you. And then you can sell.
And again, going back to a revenue leader, shifting left here, I guess the point I was getting at there is that when you get into the level of a questionnaire and you're having to fill out questions you've never seen before, you're having to come up with answers on the fly, now you have more of a human element, right? So a big reason to shift left is also that it presents opportunities for automation. We used to, when we needed help from a company, we'd call into their call center and we would talk to a human, right? And the quality of the answers and the service and what I would hear might vary from person to person. It might be based on how their day's going, right? How knowledgeable are they? And then organizations started to realize, well, if we put reusable resources out front, right? Like for software, I might go to their help center, right? Now I can fire up a chat and AI gives me the right answer to what I'm looking for. Those are automated, repeatable answers, repeatable processes where we're removing the human element and we're removing the opportunity to say, hey, can you just say we do this? Can you check that box? You're completely removing the opportunity. And as a security professional, you're removing that sort of pressure, right? Which if there is that pressure in your organization, that's something you should seriously question, obviously, but you're removing all sorts of human elements because sometimes, hey, like we're fallible. We might have the best intention, but we may accidentally misrepresent something. We may have old information, right? When you start to, Savino, you were talking about sharing these documents and other things that you're putting on the deli counter. Those are things that you've produced. They've gone through multiple reviews. They've gone through approvals. Like this is verified. This is the latest and greatest. And you have a high degree of control over that. And when you deliver that repeatably, right?
That's right.
You don't have the opportunity for mistakes. I talk to people where I get on a call, they accidentally delivered the wrong answer, customer finds out, or prospect finds out, and now they have to talk to the security team, hours of phone calls, and security team, compliance team, we're on the back foot and we're trying to defend something because we made a mistake. Yeah. So shifting left is presenting opportunities for automation, for removing the opportunity to even make a mistake in the first place. And I think for revenue leaders, that's incredibly attractive, right? Because if you're trying to increase deal velocity, the last thing you need is to shoot yourself in the foot, right? And slow everything down and potentially tank the deal altogether.
100%. I know we're running short on time. This has been really, really jam-packed. One last final question. I think, Bino, you're the right person for this. What would you say to specifically revenue leaders who are not yet operating this way, who are still under the mindset, mentality, or paradigm that security is something to shy away from, that you should wait until you have vendor of choice? You've really been kind of threading this the whole conversation, but what would you say to those revenue leaders?
Your timelines and your outcomes will be impacted the longer you wait to make the shift. That's as simple as I can put it. If you think you can talk your way around this, you're going to keep running up against the same walls. People who work for the customer, who are not involved in your journey because you didn't involve them, because you didn't think that they were part of your journey, and now they're coming as blockers to stop your deal, and you can't do a thing about it. And you wasted your time. You told your leaders that you were going to hit some numbers that are not going to happen. This is going to appear as if you don't control the whole journey. It looks bad when you don't consider the customer's diligence team as part of your buyer's journey, because they can kill deals. So the longer you wait, the longer it'll take to build. If you are waiting for the business to realize that we should invest in security, they're not going to. They're not going because they've been told I'm a cost center and they've been told that should be minimized. So you, the revenue leader, it's your job to realize that the buyer can't buy without it. And you have to push to make this a revenue investment so that you have the resources you need to push forward and close the deals in the timelines that you say you can close the deals. Because that's what we're really talking about. We're really talking about getting more control and predictability on the deal flow and how to increase volume and velocity. And the way you do this is by having the answer ready to go. And if you don't build the answer, you can't reuse the last questionnaire for this questionnaire. You know, like a lot of assets don't transfer over. Think about how much instability happens every time you have to run a fire drill. Oh my God, the questionnaire. Hey, do we do this? No. How long will it take? And then you unbalance the engineering team. You unbalance the IT team. You unbalance your revenue team because now you unbalance the legal team. There's no need for that type of fire drill at the end of every quarter if you just have the asset. And it's an investable asset you can do today. You can start small. You ask, just go look at what all of your contracts have in common and build that first. You know, and then as you go into different verticals, fintech, finserv, insurance, health tech, it's as you attack the different verticals, ask what specifically do those gatekeepers want to see, and then build that. And then over the course of 6, 8, 12, 14 months, you're starting to build an actual evidenceable story that you can now put on the website and share openly, no questions. Just this is what we do. Here's our blinking lights. Here's all the documents. Here's how we keep you safe. Here's all the documents. And it's the same cell. You know, Chase said something earlier, which was you don't want to be running behind your team to secure them. You don't want to staple security onto things. You know, shifting left means you just do things securely. It's in the process. There's no other way to do things except securely. And if you do it insecurely, the process will fail. That's what shifting left actually means. You know, because the only way is the safe way. If it's not the safe way, then you don't get to do it. So
absolutely. I love that so much. And I will say too, it makes me really, really hopeful and excited, especially for a lot of the companies we talk to here at Trustpage. It is the revenue leaders. It's the revenue leaders that are opening the door to those conversations. They're the ones inviting in the security experts to have conversations about how to make this information more present and available to customers. And it really is building a cohesive team where security really gets to be at the center. It's what binds everything together. It's the glue that holds the company story together, and it really is a team sport. So I'm very excited about this conversation and the way that we can all really use the threads of this across multiple parts of the organization to build really more secure relationships, not only with our customers, but also our internal teams too. And I think we could probably have a whole separate webinar on how doing this and shifting left in conversations really increases the relationship between internal teams when you're no longer poking your security folks the last day of the quarter of the month. But that's a different subject for a different day. Needless to say though, Chase, it's such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. So grateful to have such strong technical minds who are thinking about how to leverage these pieces of the organization across the buyer journey and making this accessible for go-to-market leaders. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for everyone who is live in this conversation. And for those folks who are attending in the replay, we'd love to have you part of this conversation. So if you're inspired and this feels interesting to you, feel free to tweet at us at Trustpage or leave us a note. And of course, if you'd like to continue the conversation and learn how you specifically at your organization can leverage a trust center to accomplish a lot of what we're talking about today, then visit us at trustpage.com. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time and thanks for joining us today.